This is an amazing topic for me. The topic of reincarnation, coming back in this. And for the longest time, I have believed in it, but I didn't really understand it, actually until I met you and your entire circle.
It's a theme.
It seems to be a reoccurring theme, right? So there's two ways I look at reincarnation. And this has happened so many times to me, where I'll meet someone and it's like, man, I feel like I know you. And a lot of people can attest to this. We've all had the same experience. Now, you can look at this two ways. Perhaps they just have an identical personality to you and it's very comfortable.
They remind you of somebody very strongly.
Exactly. Yeah. Or there is a possibility maybe you did know them in a past life. You can look at those two ways. It was ironic because when I told Rebecca, the first time I came to meet you, there was no feeling of nervousness or being scared. I was actually excited. I was excited for some odd reason. I don't know. There could have been many factors, you know. And when I first met you, I just felt it was like picking up with an old friend, you know. Hey, let's get to work, let's talk, whatever, you know. So there's so many different factors. So, but anyway, you have an there's actually multiple ways you've explained this to me, but I guess for everyone who hasn't heard it, they'll get to hear it for the first time.
Well, for the people who don't necessarily know, I'm founder of House Kepru, and one of the things with my particular magical group, and I don't go into this a whole lot, especially with the paranormal community, I've left it sort of at the door, because it's a deep rabbit hole when you start really getting into it. First of all, I believe in reincarnation. I have had enough experiences and enough verification for me, but I also understand that most of those are subjective experiences that might not be a burden of proof enough for anybody else. So that caveat is out there where it's like, I don't require you to believe it. But for me, this is very much real, and it's something that I've carried since I was very little. I definitely have had the experiences where I run across someone and they are achingly, hauntingly familiar. Sometimes for good and sometimes for bad. There's just something that it is often like meeting an old friend for the first time. And the relationship is new again, and at the same time you're carrying all of this quiet, subtle knowledge, which sometimes isn't like right up here where you can see it. It's like out of the corner of your eye, you may know, well, in this situation this person's going to do this, and then you realize that exactly that person is going to be like that. Without having prior knowledge of the person, you'll understand quirks, certain mannerisms, just the way they present themselves or carry themselves, or even phobias or things that they like, knowledges that they're drawn to, and all of these things you were able to expect, if not predict. And that kind of argues a certain amount of foreknowledge. It was difficult for me at first to find a way to verify that. Because, of course, the first thing when you're like, okay, this person's familiar to me, but maybe they don't share that familiarity. What was always interesting to me was when somebody was very familiar to me and that feeling was shared, as in the case with you. And actually, as in the case with a number of people at this point in my life, where I'm like, I'm pretty sure I know you from somewhere before. Hi, Bliss. Are we not paying enough attention to you?
Well, as far as, not to jump subjects, but as far as there have been times where I've encountered people and I felt very uncomfortable, like a threat almost, but I've just met this person. So and I'm not saying, because people can experience it, a lot of people can attest to this, you just meet someone, you get this very bad vibe. Maybe they're a bad person, you picked up on subtle signs, they were all there. Or is there something more there?
Broadly speaking, there's three things that could be going on. You're picking up on just straight up mundane world, physiological cues, body language, whatever. There's something that, your instincts on a mundane level are telling you this person is skeevy or not to be trusted. And that's entirely possible. Second possibility, which is just a variation on the first, something in your intuition, your gut instinct is telling you something about their energy, some other thing that is not necessarily mundane, but isn't necessarily tied to a past life, is giving you the information that there's something off about them. And then the third one is in certain cases, somebody is familiar and they seem like you're picking up an old friendship. You may be finding someone who is familiar and you are picking up an old enemy. Someone who betrayed you in the past, someone for whom you're carrying some sort of knowledge, some sort of baggage. And again, that's always interesting, and for me it's at least a small amount of verification if they respond the same way, if they present their piece of that puzzle. For your average person, a lot of past life stuff isn't conscious. We carry, in my opinion, in my belief, we carry the burden of our knowledge and our experience. All of us do, but most people do not carry it in a place where it is consciously recalled. So it's carried quietly in the back, in the subconscious, and it informs all of our actions and our choices, and it steers us for good or for bad. But rarely does it come to a point where your average person can see it here and know where it's coming from. And for me, that doesn't seem fair. You know, when you've got all of the stuff that you've carried and you've got people who are tied to you and you may find yourself drawn to them again and again, and you have no conscious clue why, you just are left to kind of fumble around and work your way through it, that irks me. And in my belief system, there was a long time ago that it really irked me, and there was an effort to change it. There are traditions, not only my own tradition, but other traditions in the world. The one that everybody has heard about would be the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan Buddhists.
Yes, I'm very familiar. Well, not very familiar, but familiar enough where they actually have children try to, I'm not sure you'll be able to explain this better, but pick items out to figure out, actually it's a great way to figure out if this is the reincarnated Dalai Lama.
By their belief system, they're like a soul group. They are a group of people who have made a conscious decision over a series of lives to incarnate, and they have done within their tradition different techniques and practices to hone their ability to carry their memories forward, to carry their personalities forward, so that they don't forget, they don't lose it. So it's here where they can see it, as opposed to all hanging around back here where they don't. It's a conscious decision to do that. And yes, one of the ways that they test to see who might be this particular Lama, as well as the Dalai Lama, because it's not just him, it's several of the folks in the tradition. They have items that are, you know, ritual items that are of importance to the person who has passed away. And they don't have just those items. They have one or two of the things that are significant to the person, and they have some other things. It's actually fairly scientific because they have control items.
Right.
Items that have nothing to do with that person, but a baby or a child might be drawn to. So they take the child that they suspect is the reincarnation of this particular monk, and they will put them in a room with those items and see which one the child is drawn to. And by the reports, the ones who are the reincarnations, who have carried this through, they carry that knowledge and that memory from a very early age. They're conscious of it. They may not fully be able to comprehend and have the physiological maturity to embody all of it, but it's still there. And so the child will pick it up and even often talk about it. And that level, that clarity of memory is something that is pretty much unknown to most folks in the Western world. Western religions, typically Islam, Judaism, Christianity, don't currently have any kind of reincarnational aspect to them. The foundation of most of those beliefs, it's not so much that you keep coming back as there's a destination for your soul, and this life is where that soul is going. That hasn't always been the case. In Judaism, there's Gilgul, the revolution of souls. There's arguments that early Christianity had beliefs in reincarnation, and in the Council of Nicaea, when Constantine, and pretty much when they took Christianity, there was a whole bunch of semi-conflicting traditions, and they were required to make it a standard dogmatic faith. Reincarnation is thought to have been one of the things that was removed.
Kind of, yeah.
And because in Christianity, the idea if souls come back again and again, it kind of negates the whole power of Christ dying for your sins. So
right.
That you can,
I can see a little conflict
yeah,
there.
and so there was a conflict.
Why I don't find this hard, when I got into everything, let's use the paranormal umbrella of everything, reincarnation was very actually easy for me to actually get behind. Because I think there's two ways. If you could look at it from a religious point of view or a scientific point of view, both sides believe something leaves the body after death. Correct. So we know that there is an exit. Why is it so hard that there can't be a re-entry? Right? I from that very simple-minded point, I never found that hard to believe.
I have a hard time with this life right now is so dynamic. We can change our states. We go through ups and downs. And there's this whole process of transformation and growth throughout our lives. I have such a hard time comprehending the idea that once this life is over, if the soul exists, go to a place where then it just exists in a certain state, unchanged forever. Either in hellacious perdition or up in redemptive heaven. Heaven would be hell to me if I just went there and that was it. Now I'm in this wonderful, blissful place and forever and ever, amen. I can't wrap my head personally around any state that just, and then that's it.
Yeah.
I would get bored. A little bit about me. I have remembered past lives, quite a lot of them, from a very early age. Things that I was able to verify with my mom. I really had to have been a deeply creepy child.
Right.
Seriously.
I remember some of the stories you've said.
Cause I've seen some little kids myself now who carry forth that much of who they used to be. And even though I believe in this, when a child comes up to you and they're like 2 or 3 and they call you by a name that they have never been told, have no way of in this life knowing, and they show a knowledge about someone that you know you've been or that you believe you've been, and just out of the blue this 2-year-old starts yammering at you about it in a way that is really not what you would expect to come out of a 2-year-old.
Absolutely
or 3-year-old.
not, yeah.
But you don't expect a kid to turn around and say, when I stepped on that landmine, or something silly like that. You're just like, where did that even come from?
I don't believe the Disney Channel covers that stuff yet at an age for them to get it. So you're like, you're right. It's like, did they get this from an outside source?
Well,
no, I don't believe that.
Here where we have television and radio and the media, one of the things that makes it difficult to really pin down whether the kid is remembering something or has picked it up, we have a tremendous amount of information that we're all bombarded with constantly. And kids really are sponges. I mean, they pick a lot of stuff up. So here in the Western world, it's hard sometimes to rule out something called cryptomnesia or cryptomnesia and legitimate past life memory. Let me explain. Cryptomnesia, at some point, you watched a Discovery Channel special on Celtic Ireland. You don't necessarily remember watching it, but you retained enough of the information that 10 years later, 20 years later, somebody brings it up, and you remember things that you don't recall learning. But at some point, you, Adam Kimmell, simply learned this by picking it up somewhere. And so it's not a legitimate past life memory, it's a memory that of information you have learned and forgotten that you learned. So it seems mysterious, it seems to be coming out of nowhere, but there is a logical explanation for where you picked it up. Here in the Western world, that's the hardest thing about past lives and reincarnations. Reincarnations, wow. You don't wear it like in a buttonhole in your vest. Pardon me. The hardest thing here in the West with reincarnation is it's hard to rule out what we've been exposed to, even children.
This reminds me now, we talked about this, that the best place to do a study for this would be the third world.
Dr. Ian Stevenson.
Yes.
He worked for the University of Virginia. He founded what was, when he founded it, called the Department of Personality Studies. He's one of the few folks who I had a potential of making contact and actually being able to talk and interact with him, and I didn't take it when I could have. I regret not taking the opportunity when I had the chance because he passed away a few years later. So Dr. Ian Stevenson compiled thousands, I mean literally thousands of case histories of children who remembered their past lives. The reason that he interviewed children under a certain age is he had a couple of theories on it. One, they hadn't been exposed to a whole lot of information to kind of front load them with things that they might be misremembering, might be forgetting that they had learned, or even actively trying to mislead. Third world countries, lesser developed countries, he chose because there was far less information that they were going to be exposed to. You go to a remote village in India where there are no televisions, or there's like one television for all of the people. The kids probably not watch this stuff on the Discovery Channel. And there is anecdotal information about kids where under a certain age, 5 to 7 I believe is the range, there are many reports where the kid will talk about, you know, when I was a different person, when I was a boy, when I was a man, I did this. And kids sometimes will just natter about it. Most parents here in the West will either tell them, oh, silly, that didn't happen, or, you know, we'll just, it's not part of our worldview, and so we dissuade it, we set it aside, we ignore it, or in some cases just get really, really frightened by it. In a couple of cases, I've seen people assume that it means that the kid's possessed. That, you know, this kid is giving enough information about a prior life that they thought that a ghost had attached themselves to the spirit, to the kid, and that it was a spirit talking through the kid, as opposed to the kid had literally just lived before.
It's funny. It almost, this is a perfect way of looking how different cultures handle a situation. Because, okay, take the American view. First, in India, they would be much more open in India
it's part of the Hindu. Reincarnation is part of the Hindu religion. Reincarnation is part of the Buddhist religion. You see it in Taoist too, and there's several other religions in the world that allow for reincarnation. And yes, Ian Stevenson did get he fell under a little fire because he did go to places where reincarnation was generally more accepted.
Where exactly did he target? Do you remember where he...
India, Southeast Asia. I know India was a big part. I remember seeing some pictures of people from China. He had some interesting ideas about birthmarks.
I remember you mentioning this,
that people were born with. And a couple of them are really compelling because he was able to show that the child remembered enough about who they were and how they had died, that he pulled up morgue photos. In one case, the one that I'm remembering, a bullet had entered down here and exited here, and the kid had a weird patch here and a patch that was with white hair that grew back here, and it looked, I mean, really, it lined up to the entry and exit wound.
Oh, that's
bullet.
so weird. Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, and there are some that are strangers still.
And see, I wouldn't be able to explain that. That's hard for me. Like, like it's there. Wow, the correlation. But like, from scientific research of EVP, I believe from that they do retain memories. When we were at St. Albans, we captured a spirit saying, "These are the memories that bothered me. They used to keep the bodies here." That shows me, from that evidence alone, they remember that. So the memories transferring over. That's really cool that you would have a physical feature.
Well, and that would tell me, because, well, we talked about it with ghosts where they don't, if they're really, really traumatized and really hung up on it, they'll present that.
I see where you're going with this. Yes, all right.
By most traditions that believe in reincarnation, you're not supposed to remember. You're supposed to live each life and not carry all of the baggage, to kind of let it go. Now, while there are processes to kind of awaken to the larger scope of multiple lives, that's not for everybody. Your average person dies.
Oh, did that one die? How much battery power do we have on that one?
Your average person, when they die, they go through that process of letting go of the previous life, and they move on to something. Probably the most poetic description is they go back to a source that is like a great ocean, and they are unburdened of all of the traumas and things. They go through a period where they're cleansed, and then they come back without the scars and the pain and the stuff. They keep the lessons, but they lose all of the stuff that makes those lessons very, very hard to carry. By Ian Stevenson's theories, as well as a number of world traditions I've read, that system breaks down when somebody carries so much of it forward that they don't forget that they're still hung up in that previous lifetime, so much so that they can't live here and now. Now, I actually agree with that part. If you are so burdened by your past that you can't be present in this lifetime, that you can't focus on what you're supposed to experience here and now as this union of body and spirit, which is unique, then you're missing the whole point. I get a lot of people who want to remember stuff about past lives, and that's kind of an early mistake. Like, people get really excited. I can remember this lifetime when I was doing this thing, and their vision gets focused so far in the past that they just like face plant into their future. Like they're too busy looking backwards to move forward. So that's the pitfall. And he saw for some of the kids, much like a spirit that is earthbound, that is stuck, they took up a new body, but they were haunting themselves. They were still haunted by how they died, and they carried so much of that forward that they couldn't let it go, and it was interfering with here and now. So not only was it a problem, and it could have caused them to haunt where they had died, they got pulled back into a body, and they still hadn't worked through it. Now, like I said, like with the Dalai Lama, Tibetan Buddhists, it's not always a bad thing to remember. There are ways to do it functionally. Just like there are spirits who remember who they were, and they do come back and they haunt places, but they're not bound, they're not stuck, there's a choice. The bottom line is there are ways that it can be functional, and there are definitely ways that it can be dysfunctional. If somebody remembers that one shining example of their past lives where they were a princess or a king or a great general, and everything was wonderful and perfect, and all they ever do is hold that example up to what they're doing in this life. Well, first of all, they're going to miss all their lessons in this life, and second of all, it's going to look like a whole bunch of crap. I mean, if you're holding everything up to this example, you lose sight of what is really important here and now.
This just occurred to me, and this may sound
No, go ahead.
So dumb, but I had heard, and I believe it's the Dalai Lama and the Lamas did it. They crack their knuckles. Maybe it's not them, or there is maybe certain monks that they crack their knuckles to make the bones stronger.
Okay,
right?
that is something that you do in most martial arts.
Martial arts, right, to make it stronger.
I can fairly say that it's not the Dalai Lama.
Not them, because they're more pacifist.
But in most martial arts, you do things to condition the bones and
to make it stronger.
And that's the whole board-breaking thing. And so because
this has relevance. I know this sounds odd. This is an odd-opener.
I kind of get where you're going.
Do you think there is an advantage to coming back? Because it's known you are very, very smart, high IQ. Do you believe that when they're coming back, you're actually increasing intelligence? You're actually adding more memories and lives that you can unlock. Do you see where I'm going? Like
I totally know.
Maybe there's an advantage once you know that you can come back, that you're almost increasing strengths. Does that make sense? It's an odd thing to say, but I'm like, when I'm listening to this, I'm like, why would the Dalai Lama be interested in this routine? Did they figure something out that if you keep coming back, the knowledge keeps getting added and added and added?
The whole point in that system of being a spiritual immortal, actually in Taoism, that's a big deal. To spiritually cultivate yourself to a point where you achieve a type of immortality. And they have a couple of different types of immortality, but one of them is spiritual immortality, which is simply you hit a point where you can maintain an unbroken thread of personality and memory, and you can come back again and again and learn more and enrich yourself more and carry it forward each time. And exactly what you're saying, expand your knowledge.
It just seems like
cheat. I cheat.
I know, and I'm thinking this might be acquired from somewhere else at another time and just brought.
There is a reason why I am a little obsessed with collecting books that refer to the things that I might remember, so that I can then point to that stuff and have a citation to back up. Actually, let me tell you a really kind of funny story. I wrote an article on ancient Egyptian deities, I don't know, something like 10 years ago. Actually, it had to have been more than 10 years ago now because my mom was still alive. And it's called More Than Human Faces. And in it, I cited, this is going to sound really off the wall, the god Thoth was associated with timekeeping, and baboons were one of the animals that were associated with god Thoth. Thoth has an ibis head, so the ancient Egyptians believed that on the equinoxes, baboons would piss once every hour.
I'm following you still. I'm following you.
I understand that sounds really, really weird. And the Egyptians had a water clock, and the workable part of the water clock was a baboon pissing, and the water would drip, and it was a timekeeper. But the functional part was the baboon, because baboons were associated with time and associated with Thoth. Okay.
All right, yeah.
So I mentioned this in the article, and the magazine I was writing for, they were very, they found citations and footnotes very important. Most everything else I was perfectly capable of finding citations for. They were like, a baboon water clock? Baboons pissing? What? What? Give me a citation. Like, you just pulled this out of your ass.
Right.
So I'm talking to my mom, and I'm pissing and moaning about it, because I'm like, I remember this. I'm like, I'm pretty sure, I mean, I know that this was a thing. And she's like, oh, honey, you've been talking about ancient Egypt since you were like, knee-high to a grasshopper, and then blah, 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 blah. So you probably just remembered. I'm like, I know I remember it, but I need to find it as a site. Like, it needs to be somewhere, because it's not relevant to anybody but me if I can't prove that, no, really, that's an actual thing. Thankfully, the internet exists.
Right.
I love the internet. I have got the Library of Alexandria not only at my fingertips, but freaking I can do like Google searches in it, and I don't have to like go through every single book individually. It's amazing. It is wonderful. It is the best thing ever. And so I'm just like, okay, baboon piss water clock, and I Google whack it, and I find like 2 really obscure academic papers that, yes, this is a thing.
Oh my. And that, I think, rests the case on what I'm getting at.
And,
I knew there had to be a deeper purpose to it. Yes.
Oh, no, I totally cheat. And it's a wisdom tradition. It's about bringing things forward. For the Dalai Lama and those, it's about bringing forward information and wisdom.
And that's the only reason I brought up the knuckle breaking, because I didn't think of this, but almost like bettering yourself. How do you conditioning to almost, it is cheating in a sense, I guess if you put it, but like taking it farther than the natural state.
Let me explain my belief system with how this is important, why this is important. Each person has their individual lives, and over the course of multiple lives, at first, your whole purpose is to just get the hang of being alive, being a person, and so you don't want to have to worry about all that other crap. So each lifetime, you're there, you're present in that life, and you have your experiences, and all your work is just focused on being the best person that you can be, your most authentic self from the start and finish to that life. And you don't have to worry about the bigger picture or anything else. And you just kind of keep doing it until at some point you hit a realization of, I am more than this. At which point you start to realize that there is a larger cycle. There's a larger self. Not just one lifetime, but multiple lives where there's a larger arc to who you are. And so you move to a larger work of developing yourself over that arcing series of lives. You become conscious of being not just a body, not just a single person, but the sum of many different faces. And at that point you are, to borrow the Taoist way, you begin to spiritually cultivate yourself. You begin to grow not only as a person, but as a soul. Now there are borrowed words, dharma and karma. We here in the West like grabbed karma up and we're like, karma, it's totally like everything you do comes back at you, and it's ridiculously oversimplified. A more important word that should have been borrowed is dharma, which is your life's path, but also your soul's path. Like, what are you supposed to be doing? What is your journey? What is your quest? What fulfills you? And this idea of this larger arc, that dharma, your purpose, becomes a much bigger thing. By my belief, each individual lifetime is something that has the potential to enrich and teach you. You have a role to play, but part of that role is always going to be about bringing forth some part of you, solving some part of your personal puzzle, working out some problem in your personality. I think that there are certain parts of your soul, your higher self, that don't change. Like there are certain qualities and quirks, both good and bad, that are just there. That is who you are. But each lifetime may teach you how to make different choices about them. You may never be able to completely remove the fact that sometimes, under certain circumstances, you're kind of a dick, but you can realize over successive lifetimes that, you know what, I don't always have to act on these impulses. I can choose to be different. You understand the value of that choice, and you begin to understand the value of the people that you interact with and the people that you're connected with. There is another concept of soul groups. People who go through that process together. You're not doing it alone. You have other people, and you play off of one another. In my group, we have a prayer, and one of the lines is, "We've been many things to one another, brothers, lovers, friends, and bitterest enemies." And you've seen a little bit, kind of on the periphery of me and my social circle, where there's a rapport that many of us have, and we fall into oftentimes interactions that seem very out of step for like this modern world. Like you can kind of see how it harkens to something else, and it doesn't always make a lot of sense. We interact with one another and play off of one another in this process, in this whole learning process of being pieces of one another's puzzle in that larger arc, as we are moving forward and going through this process to carry all this other information forward. It's fun and interesting and complicated, and it's a very, very deep rabbit hole.
It's just as I'm staring right now, just wow. It's awesomely deep, and I love it, but it's just...
And sometimes it leads to water clocks that are baboons pissing.
Right? Hopefully there are some answers, because it's like you're gonna watch this and be like, wow, there's like 900,000 more questions, but but I get it. It's so deep, and it's just it's so good. But yes,
as someone who, by my belief, has lived before, has carried that forward, the most important thing to take away from that with reincarnation and past lives is, I'm still here right now. Anything else I've been, while it can give me an edge and give me a foundation and be handy stuff that enriches who I am now, I have work to do as this person. And if I lose myself in, maudlin sentimentality over who I used to be and fail to focus here and now, be present in this life, I miss all of its lessons. And so, while it is helpful to know where I've been in order to understand where I am right now, if I am not here and now, first and foremost, I do a disservice to everyone who I have ever been. Yeah, that's kind of deep.
That's a great place to end. That's really good. That's really good. That's excellent.